That's us now, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Okay, good morning, members, and welcome to the meeting of the Police, Fire and Rescue Subcommittee. We have a number of important reports to consider this morning and anticipate that we'll deal with the business in our usual efficient manner. Before I start, though, I would just like to recognise the work of Police Scotland V Division and our local fire and rescue service over the last 10 months or so during the COVID pandemic. This has obviously presented unique and unprecedented challenges and stretched resources to the limit, but it's very much appreciated the flexibility, adaptability and commitment shown by officers and firefighters and for both organisations to help to respond rapidly to the change in circumstances within the region and to keep our constituents safe. Could also just say to members, as usual, if you want to speak at any point, to raise your hand or to type in the chat function, and hopefully Tracy will keep an eye on that for me. So we'll move on to item 1, Sedern and apologies. Tracy, are you able to give the Sedern and apologies?
Yes, thank you, Chair. We've got 10 members present. 7 members are participating through Teams, which includes yourself, Chair, and we've got 3 members present in Council HQ, being Councillor Bell, Councillor Charteris and Councillor Scobie. 1 member not present at the start of the meeting is Councillor Davidson.
Okay, Tracy, thanks. Councillor Davidson contacted me. He will be joining us in the next wee while, I hope. Okay, and as always now with virtual meetings, I approve this meeting in terms of members having remote participation. Item 2, declaration of interest. Do any members have a declaration of interest they wish to make at this time? No? Okay. So move on to item 3, minutes of the previous meeting of 5th December 2019. Can we note the minutes of the meeting on the 5th of December last year? Okay, we're all happy to note. Good, thank you. Okay, down to the business. Item 4, Police Scotland, Dumfries and Galloway, local plan, 18-month performance update for 1st of April 2019 through to 30th of September 2020. Chief Superintendent Linda Jones is here to answer any questions that members will have. However, is there anything that you would like to add at this point, Linda, before we move over to questions?
Yes, please, Chair. And first of all, thanks very much for the kind comments at the beginning of the meeting. I'll just provide a very quick overview and then happy to take any observations or questions. So good morning, everyone. It's quite unusual doing this in Teams, but good to know you're all here at the meeting today. Firstly, thanks very much for giving me the opportunity to present these performance reports to you today. I'm aware you're in receipt of 2 reports. The first report is the full year's performance from April 19 to March 2020, and the second report covers the 1st of April this year until the end of September. I'll focus on the second report today, which is the more up-to-date figures, but happy to take any questions on the first report also. Let me just start by saying it has been a challenging year so far for policing in Dumfries and Galloway. Since March, we've had to adapt our approach to ensure that officers and the public were kept safe. This has resulted in reduced face-to-face contact, particularly in the first stages of the pandemic, and generally we've had to risk assess every call we've attended. Personally, I've had to make sure my officers were equipped and kept safe in terms of having the appropriate PPE, and also they were kept up to date with the changing restrictions. In the main, the public have adhered to the restrictions. We have tried to educate rather than enforce. However, any blatant disregard has been dealt with appropriately. And just to give you a wee insight into what we have dealt with, since March, we've issued 96 fixed penalty tickets for COVID breaches, and we've dispersed over 1,600 people from various different situations. At a national level, we have seen a real increase in calls to our service centre, and I totally understand that this can be very frustrating. However, please be assured that our response continues to be based on threat, risk and harm, and that means that the most vulnerable in our communities will be prioritised. Moving on to the performance report, I would just like to highlight a few points from it. So the second report shows that violent crime is significantly down, so that includes our serious assaults, robberies and common assaults, and is obviously a positive. However, we need to take into account that in March and April of this year, our crime figures were much lower in the initial lockdown period. These crime rates have now returned to where we would probably expect to see them going forward. You'll also see, some really positive detection rates in this field, and that's really down to the officers' excellent hard work and commitment. I just want to highlight disorder. You will see there's a significant increase there. However, this is due to the COVID-related calls, which we have received a lot of, all been categorised as disorder. And moving on to house break-ins, is a positive there, as you'll note the improved detection rate of 48.5%, along with a decrease in the number of crimes. There's also been a decrease in shoplifting and vandalisms, as we would expect. The area of concern for me that I absolutely wanted to point out this morning is public protection across the board. We have seen a real marked increase in our vulnerable person reports, a 17% increase in our domestic incidents, and an increase in hate crime also. Please be assured we continue to look at these areas on a daily basis, and we are working closely with partners to support victims and to make sure those most vulnerable in our communities are getting sufficient support also. I just wanted to pick out hate crime and give you a wee bit context round about that. We have seen an increase, but 25% of all reported hate crimes are against police officers when they are arresting individuals, and it's verbal comments. There has only been one hate crime this year which has had any violence whatsoever. Moving on to road safety and road crime, obviously the early stages of lockdown saw a real reduction in number of vehicles on the road, and that is reflected in the figures presented to you in the second report. In terms of those injured and killed, unfortunately there's been 6 people have died on our roads this year, which is the same as the previous year, but there's a real marked decrease in those seriously injured, which was 21 compared to 56 previously. Moving on to public confidence, I'm delighted to say it remains high. We will have our challenges over the next few months and the next year in terms of Brexit, COP26, and probably most importantly, COVID recovery. However, we'll continue to serve the communities and deliver a service. I continue to be grateful for all your support, and I'm happy to take any questions on the performance reports that have been presented to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. So we'll open up for members' questions on the 2 reports. So who do we have first? Ian Howie.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, Linda.
Hi, Ian.
Regarding page 28 and the way that sexual offences are being recorded, I have slight concerns that we're recording offences as opposed to the number of victims or the number of perpetrators. Hypothetically, you could have 100 cases of sexual offences committed by 10 individuals against 10 victims, but if 90 of these were committed against the one individual by the same person, you would have a detection rate of 90%, although 9 out of 10 offenders weren't detected. Am I correct in that, or am I picking this up wrong?
So, thanks for your question, Councillor, and it's something that I think is picked out on the report. The breakdown where it says, I think on the first one it's 103 less victims, is not representative of what it actually means. You're right, you could have one victim who reports 10 crimes, but we have to count every single crime. So, for instance, if you had a victim reported 10 sexual assaults over a 2-year period, but there was only sufficient evidence to detect 3 of them. Only 3 of them would show as detected. But the report, the template says victims, but it's for sexual crime. That is not accurate. If it gives you any comfort, Councillor, we have a crime register who works at a force level, who overviews all of our crimes to make sure we're counting them correctly. They do regular audits to make sure we count the correct number of crimes, and the detections we count are accurate as well. Does that answer your question?
It does to an extent, Linda, but it's just, as I say, from these figures, we cannot tell how many people have been sexually assaulted in our area, and we cannot tell how many people have been identified and arrested on these figures that are presented to us.
Yeah, I totally see where you're coming from. I can try and get the template changed, Councillor, for the next time to make that more reflective.
That'd be appreciated.
Okay, thanks, Ian. Next, Andy Ferguson.
Thanks, Dougie. Good morning, Linda. It's on the same vein as Ian. How we just was asking there. I'm wondering, like us, maybe some others, I was lobbied by the national group who are suggesting that there's 25% of all domestic abuse cases in Scotland are actually men against men. And I'm wondering if, when you're reviewing the statistics that Ian's just asked you for, if you could actually include how many victims were actually men.
No problem, Councillor. I don't have that information to my fingertips, but I can certainly look at that for you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Andy. I don't see any hands raised or anyone else wanting to speak. So thanks.
Dougie?
Oh, who's that? David Stitt.
I hope no. Dougie, it's Willie Scobie.
Oh, sorry, Willie.
Thanks, Dougie. Dougie, it was just, or Linda, it was on your verbal report on vulnerable persons and the increase to that and the process in terms of MASH and multi-agency sharing hub. And I just wonder if you have any idea, you know, anyone who's reported through to MASH by police as being a vulnerable person, then when they reach the point of social work or anyone from the multi-agency looking at it, that person then does not meet the adult support and protection legislation, and therefore they don't perhaps get the assessed needs that they require as a vulnerable person. I just wonder, in your experience, if that's a regular occurrence and just put the percentages.
Thanks, Councillor. Unfortunately, I don't have percentages for that. I can tell you that when we attend these calls, we obviously provide as much assistance to these vulnerable people as we can, and obviously what we put in that report is very important in terms of sharing the information with our colleagues to make sure a true picture is painted of the circumstances we encounter. We then also look at if there's been any previous instance of a similar type as well, and that is taken into account as well. Obviously, there are a number of meetings between partners on a daily basis just to look at those most vulnerable, but I can't provide percentages for you, Councillor.
Could I go back, Dougie?
Yes, of course.
Aye, I'm looking at this, and without going into individual cases, Linda, but just recently, and it may be low numbers when you say that the vulnerable persons have increased. I'm just wondering if, you know, I have heard of at least, well, I've heard of 2 and I've dealt with 1, and I just wonder where we go when the police recognise the individuals as vulnerable persons, yet the legislation doesn't. And, you know, when it does go to MASH, I just wonder what assessment and where that individual goes in terms of the protection, support and protection that individual may need And, you know, it's not just about percentages or figures. It's about individuals who require that support and whether they're getting the proper support still out there in the community as vulnerable people.
Yeah, so it's a good point, Councillor, and it's very, very difficult to manage, but there is a threshold that has to be met that you're obviously aware of. When we talk about an increase, I mean, it's been a substantial increase we have seen, which has obviously placed more demand on the services. I'm happy if you would like to have a meeting about it off table if you've got some instances you would like to discuss with me.
Delighted to do it, but you know, I think it's something that we've got to look at. If, as you're reporting, that there is an increase to it, and we've got vulnerable people out there who do read. So, welcome a round table meeting with you, Linda.
Okay, and I suppose this is about the COVID recovery, because we knew there was going to be problems from people during the lockdown who couldn't get out the house or had other issues, and I personally have had to put further resources into the MASH to deal with the increased demand, but happy to have a Teams meeting or a face-to-face meeting with you going forward, Councillor.
Face-to-face, please.
Okay, thanks, Willie. We now have Jeff Lever, please.
Thanks, Chair. Looking at the figures, I mean, I can see how well we're doing 1 year compared to the next and 1 year compared to the 5-year average. And in various parts within the report, and also on page 56 of the following document, it states that you know, crime is low within Dumfries and Galloway compared to national figures. But there's nothing actually within the figures which shows me that, in terms of, and I've raised this on several occasions in the past, in terms of reassuring the public that Dumfries and Galloway is a safe place to live. There's nothing in there that actually proves that. Is there some sort of occasions when we can actually show comparisons with the national average? I mean, in education, for example, we have comparative local authorities where we can actually look at how well we're doing in education. We also have national figures, so we can actually see how well we're doing. Can we have something similar to this? I'm not saying for every parameter we should have that, but on occasional parameters where it is relevant in terms of public confidence.
Thank you. That's a really good point, and it's something I look at every Monday in terms of the rest of Scotland and what the crime rates are at and what the detection levels are at, and we perform particularly well, and we do have low crime rates down here. It's all relative, of course. It's not something we've ever really published before in terms of, you know, which division is performing best or which is the lowest crime rates. They've never been keen to do that. I don't know whether it does give you any assurance that it's something I keep my eye on very, very keenly. I don't think they would be keen for me to include it in the template in terms of other divisions.
You want to come back, Jeff, or you?
Well, yeah, okay. I don't want to get into a competition about it, but you know, if you just had the national average, for example, that removes any sort of divisional competitions against the national average.
Okay, I'll certainly take that on board. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Next, Andy Ferguson again.
Thanks, Dougie. Linda, I'm kind of picking up the theme that Willie was talking about. Now, I know historically the police have been very, very good at reporting into the vulnerable adult setup. So, because of COVID, has that reduced that level, or are you going through a different route now, or is it still the protection of vulnerable adults legislation route that you're using?
It's still the same, Councillor, that we still use the same, but obviously we have a different way of dealing with our business now in terms of teams rather than face-to-face discussions to discuss any cases.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other people or members want to speak, so I think we'll move on to recommendations. So thanks for your response to those questions, Linda. So in terms of recommendations, members are asked to scrutinise the performance report for Dumfries and Galloway from Police Scotland for the period 1st April 2019 to 31st March 2020, as detailed in Appendix 1, and scrutinise the performance report for Dumfries and Galloway for Police Scotland 1st April 2020 through to 30th September 2020, and I'm sure members are satisfied that we have done that. Okay, so move now on to item number 5, consultation on the draft Dumfries and Galloway local policing plan 2020 to 2023. Chief Superintendent Linda Jones is here, of course, for any questions or comments that members may have on the draft plan. Do you have anything you would like to say before we open up to questions, Linda?
Thanks, Chair. I hope you find it an informative document which captures all the good work and activity by police and partners in Dumfries and Galloway, but happy to take any observations or any questions on it, on how you would like it changed or made better.
Do you have any questions? Jeff Lever.
It's just regarding Brexit and Cairn Ryan. What differences do you see occurring down there as a result of whatever's going to happen on the 31st of December?
Yeah, that's a $1 million question, isn't it? Yes, it's going to have an impact on the region. I see it having an impact on policing, depending on how things go. One of my superintendents is going to meetings on a weekly basis with Transport Scotland and other partners at the moment, so we are well placed to react and have contingencies in place should we require them. I will have to look at my resourcing picture across the region and may have to move resources around, which I can do. I can also call on national resources if I feel they need them at the time, but it's very much the forefront of my mind. But it's who knows where we'll be in 3 months' time, Councillor. But we are preparing with contingencies in place.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Ian Howie.
Thank you, Chair. Linda, public interaction and engagement, one of the most appreciated developments over the years has been DG Vost. And I believe that there was going to be moves to convert that into an app so you could access it directly from wherever you are on your phone. Are you aware of any progress being made on that particular development?
I'm not, to be fair, Councillor. The DG Vost is a great thing we've got in the region. I can find out about the app. Obviously, technology and the police sometimes doesn't go in the same sentence, but I can find out about that and get back to you if that's okay.
That's ideal. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ian. Andy Ferguson.
Again, Linda on the Marquis Stranraer. I totally get your answer, and I think it's the only one you can probably give us. But I think what I'm really wondering here is that to bring in some temporary support from elsewhere is fine, but it's a very short-term measure, and we should know within a few days, I would suggest. So, has there been or have there been any talks already about permanent upping the establishment of the division to cope with the Port Cairn Ryan?
Thanks, Councillor. It's probably in a way similar to what we did at the beginning of the pandemic, that we utilised office staff to help out on the front line when our absence was a bit higher. That is one option I have got down here, is to utilise office staff. I've also got the port staff who have increased in number over the last few years, who we work very closely with. I won't get an increase in my establishment on a permanent basis, but I have absolutely got an assurance from Police Scotland that I will get resources when I need them in the short term, Councillor.
Can I come back in?
Yes, you can.
I think that's my problem. Having had the privilege, shall I say, of serving at the port from a different force a number of years ago. I think it's quite short-sighted if we don't actually plan now for a permanent, because if that is the main port of entry from the Irish United Ireland situation, there's got to be a lot more involved there than just lorries on the A75, as you're very well aware. So I suppose I think the question here, Dougie, is what are we asking Scottish Government to tackle the UK Government about, because it's still a reserved issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. Do you want to come back in that, Linda, or...?
I think just to say it's not all about the police response. You know, there's a number of partners involved in this, and we will all work together. But I just want you to have an assurance that I won't sit back and, you know, leave it to the last minute. We are absolutely planning now for worst case scenarios so that we do have sufficient resources in the right place at the right time.
Okay, thanks. And I suppose it is difficult, Linda, when we don't know precisely what's going to happen when the time comes. Question from Willie Scobie, please.
Thanks, Dougie, and it's good to hear Stranraer mentioned so often this morning. But Linda, and it is a big issue at the Port of Cairnryan. Indeed, we've had briefings. I've met with Mark Thompson just to get an update. So it's not just about the policing, it's about the whole lorry parking situation, border controls in terms of a suitable place for them. And yet we're only days away from the transition period ending and Brexit being kicked in. So running alongside that is both the A77 and the A75 for upgrading. And I would like to think that Police Scotland would have a presence, or this committee would have lobbying activity in terms of getting those two roads upgraded, particularly with the union's connectivity strategy under review. And given what Boris Johnson said about the bridge, then even if it was to be a bridge, well, I hope it never is, then we do have two roads that aren't fit for purpose, as I'm sure you could go on at length on in terms of you having to police it. So I think there is a role for us as a police and fire committee to look at that and see how we do lobby, so that we do get the Scottish Government and the UK Government talking together rather than one on a standoff. Can I just look at pages 52, Linda? And I see there's reference to the protecting vulnerable people in 57. That'll maybe pick up with you when we meet. But just on the priorities for antisocial behaviour, and I know Brian Lee has done a tremendous amount of work on this in looking at this as a review. And for you, Linda, I would hope that you would take on board that in all the agencies and all the bringing of people together, and perhaps, in my opinion, what was missing was the elected members' role in terms of the outcomes of some of these MATAC meetings and the sharing of that information with local members who are involved in cases in antisocial behaviour. And I don't think we've got that right yet, and it's been many, many years that we haven't got it right in terms of the ability to share the information with the elected members, which we're entitled to under the legislation in terms of members' rights. And I would like to see in the plan that we have some way of recognising this, looking at the valuable information that elected members have and how we feed back to members when they're dealing with cases on casework that they do.
I think just before you respond to that, Linda, we need to be careful, I think, that we're not sort of drifting into the sort of operational independence of the police in terms of specific incidents, and perhaps this is about ongoing communication. But if you'd like to respond to that point from Councillor Scobie, Linda, please do.
Okay, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Councillor. So, yeah, elected members are really important to me. You are the eyes and ears of the community, and I think we should be working very closely together. I encourage my area commanders to communicate with you as much as possible, whether that's even by an email to advise you on a Monday morning of an incident that's taken place. I don't think we can do enough of it, but it does get a wee bit difficult sometimes in terms of sharing information. But I'll certainly take that on board, Councillor, for the future.
Thank you, Dougie, and or Linda, and be assured it wasn't about an individual case, Dougie, nor for me to start doing the work of the police.
Yeah, I'm always a bit sensitive because when I was in the police myself, I had a certain councillor who was on the police and fire committee who thought he was the chief constable, but that's another story. Davy Stitt.
Morning, Linda. Just a wee update. Seeing we haven't had our usual community policing meetings, can you give us an update on the CAM model, please? Have it still been successful?
Yes, thanks, Councillor. And yes, it is still being successful. It probably doesn't have the same results in this area as it does in the Central Belt, where the call volume is much, much higher. I regularly meet with the superintendents at the control rooms just to see what level of calls they're dealing with, and they give me assurances in terms of what is being diverted via CAM and what service we are providing. Again, it is those most vulnerable that the CAM system looks at in terms of threat, risk and harm, and there's been some really good examples down here of partners coming together, which probably there was times where there's been things missed in the past, but I'm confident that CAM still delivers a service for us in Dumfries and Galloway.
Okay, David. Jeff Lever, please.
Thanks, Chair. On page 55, 19 of the report, it's referenced ever-developing telephone line scams. He's obviously followed pattern about a year, 2 years ago with Microsoft, a virus on your computer, give access to your computer and they'll sort it for you. More recently, it's outstanding warrant for non-payment of fine. I keep getting phone calls about this. I don't know whether I've got outstanding warrant because I never actually respond to them. But how do we make the members of the public aware that these scams are out there and they shouldn't respond to it, particularly the more vulnerable people who probably don't use social media and therefore aren't aware of it through that particular means?
Yes, you're right, and some of them are so convincing, it's really difficult to tell they're a scam. The first thing I was going to mention was social media. We do try and put messages out there on our social media channels. However, I'm totally aware that not everybody in the community uses social media. So obviously we've got our local newspapers and we've got our, not so much now, our drop-ins with our community constables, but the community constables quite often just do pop-up events where they can advise the public on these scams, but we haven't been able to do as many of them recently, obviously, due to the pandemic.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other hands raised or people wanting to speak. So thanks for your responses to those questions on the draft plan, Linda. Moving to the recommendations, members were asked to scrutinise the Dumfries and Galloway draft local policing plan for 2020 to 23 and note that the final draft of the policing plan will be presented to full council in the first quarter of 2021. Okay, are we happy to note that, members? Yes.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. And thanks very much, Linda, for joining us this morning. It's much appreciated.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on to item 6, Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, Dumfries and Galloway, local plan, 18-month performance update, 1st of April 2019 to 30th September 2020. Our local senior officer, Craig McGoldrick, is here to answer any questions that we have on the two reports. And just in the first instance, Craig, is there anything you would like to say before we open it up to questions?
Good morning. Thank you, Chair. And just like my colleague from the police, I would just like to acknowledge your opening remarks and give you assurance that that will be passed on to the staff. So that's very kind of you. Good morning, members. Once again, I'm grateful to be here for the opportunity to present our two local performance reports this morning on behalf of the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. Although these reports cover the last 18 months concurrently, I just wanted to highlight that the split of the report is reflective of two very different times, and I'm sure we're all very aware of that. And that's affected our communities, but also the members of staff that have had to live and operate in that. Despite the challenges, I genuinely believe that the area has been able to continue to demonstrate our value, the level of preparedness and ability to react to these unprecedented times. A lot of that's down to the robust and continued business continuity planning that we do as an organisation. And we've not only managed to maintain the operational response expected by our communities, but we've also been able to maintain our prevention agenda where appropriate, working with partners. As part of today's agenda, under item 7, members will also note that I've brought forward a draft local area fire plan titled for 2020. Hopefully the committee will recognise the desire for this plan to be a transition from a fixed period that we've had in the past to more of an ongoing under review plan, and that's very significant. I feel in these times that we need that flexibility to recognise that we're not quite at our new normal. So I will give that assurance that that plan will remain under constant review and will continue to engage with yourself and develop as we see fit. So on that basis, Chair, I'm happy to take questions on either the performance reports and leading into the draft plan. Thank you.
Apologies, I was on mute. That's become this sort of standard line for the COVID, isn't it? You're on mute. Graham Bell.
Thanks, Chair. Craig, looking at the deliberate fire setting and the performance reports on that, obviously North West Dumfries comes up pretty high there, and also in the non-domestic fire safety as well, North West Dumfries, my ward, comes up pretty high. Obviously, you know, a lot of this will be down to maybe weather patterns, and obviously you've been working with social landlords to try and stamp out some of these deliberate fires. What other factors were obviously contribute towards this high figure, and is there any way we can reverse this downward trend in North West Dumfries?
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, a very good question, and hopefully to reassure you, put a bit of context behind it. The spike that we saw was actually during the period of lockdown, and it was reflective in terms of the challenges that we had across the wider partners with maintaining recycling centres and the ability to maintain our refuse and collection services. So that whilst they were deliberate, it reflects people burning their waste in their gardens or within local areas of land that were available to them. So that is something that we've seen has quite drastically tailed off as we've started to get back and open up these services. So I'm content that as we go forward that won't be seen as a significant spike. Non-domestic fires, again, that's a reflection of the premises that were empty during the period where everybody was displaced and asked to work from home. But I have no reason to believe that there's anything that is unusual. I said at the start that these two separate reports, I do believe it's going to be very difficult for us to actually use this as a direct comparison in years going forward, because it is so unique in the way that our communities and behaviours have changed. So we will probably find ourselves using this as a point of reference in many conversations to come. But hopefully that context gives you a wee bit of comfort that there's not a trend developing that we're not aware of.
Thanks, Craig. Obviously, you mentioned that obviously a number of these incidents take place during the lockdown, but looking at the performance report on it, it was the 1st of April 2019 to the 31st 2020, so obviously there wouldn't be a lot involved in lockdown during this period.
Apologies, Councillor, I was concentrating more on the most recent report. So in terms of the figures there, we did see a slight rise over that year period, but that's a total of 6 fires. So to try and put that in context again, it's because the numbers that we are discussing are so low. You're absolutely correct about the location by ward. Obviously, North West Dumfries is a standout, and that was at a time where we started to change our approach and work more proactively with police and partners. You'll have noticed that we had a presence in and around the area of the hotspots. We took our community safety vehicles and we had roving patrols as joint patrols to make sure we were engaging with those that we felt were an age group and a specific group that were actually at the root cause of the fires. And again, we saw some real results during that period as that was transitioned into the following holidays or the light nights. So I'm very comforted that back in the 2019 report, the actions that we took actually made the difference. And then again, moving forward to the more recent report, that is due to a certain set of specific circumstances. Hopefully that helps, Councillor.
You okay with that, Graham? Yes. Okay, thanks. So next up is Ian Howie and then Jeff Lever and Ian Blake. Ian Howie.
Thank you, Chair. Craig, pages 79 and 95 regarding automatic detection and occultation or activation. I take it that this is in domestic dwellings, and these are smoke detectors, 74 present, but only 36 activating. Is that correct? Is it almost 50% of these alarms are not activated?
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, in terms of the way we compile reports when we attend a domestic incident, the number of the questions to allow us to create this rich data is about was there detection fitted in the premise. That obviously, as you would expect, leads on to making sure that we don't leave a house without detection and for the safety of the communities. The detection actuated is not necessarily to suggest that there's a failing within the system. It's just another reflection of the severity or the smoke that may have been produced by the fire. So that the yes-no part about activation doesn't necessarily suggest that these houses don't have a working system. It's about was there sufficient products of combustion to set it off. So it's a figure there that does need a degree of interpretation, and it comes back down to other supporting evidence such as, is it the item first ignited or the room of ignition, and that starts to build that bigger picture. But the way you interpret that, yes, on the occasions that we attended, all our domestic dwelling accidental fires, 74, so 3/4 of those premises had smoke detection fitted. And of that, we know that there was a reason for 34 of them to actuate.
Right, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ian. So next up, Jeff Lever.
Well, mine also refers to smoke detection. I don't know whether it's this report or your next 3-year plan, but obviously the legislation has now changed as far as you need to have a smoke detector in the main living room, in each of the halls, and also a heat detector in the kitchen, and they all have to be linked. And that was due to come in April next year. And I think it came as a huge surprise to a lot of people. So it was delayed until April 2022. So what does that mean in terms of all the smoke detectors which you've installed over the years? Are they now redundant? You have to go back and reinstall the upgraded system?
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, a very topical subject, as you would expect. To try and rewind and add the history there, if you like, this was part of the findings of a Scottish Government ministerial working group that was created for post-Grenfell. And a number of the priorities that were established to that group was to look around the safety within homes. As you would expect, smoke detection, fire detection formed a large part of that. The Ministerial Working Group carried out a period of consultation to see how they could improve that safety. This is clearly all under the guise of Scottish Government and Minister for Housing and Social Justice. The findings following the consultation, which closed in December 2017, was a desire for standardisation and to ensure that there was a system that would alert regardless where you were in the house, as opposed to it may just be the smoke detector near the seat of the fire that was actuating. Hence, that's where the legislation came from. You are entirely right, the legislation was due to come in. It would have been February of 2021, but with COVID and the feeling that there was, I suppose it was a struggle to raise awareness with everything else that was going on. So it was put back that 12-month period. To answer your second part of the question, locally, we will never walk away from a house without a detector. We will still continue to fit the duty that we have, because we are not the enforcing body. That will be local authority. We are supporting the transition, if you like, a way to describe this, for the Scottish Government. So we have been giving some funding, which equates to us having the new detection to meet the legislation that we can fit. But we will only do that to the high risk. So based on historical figures pro rata, that means that we are set up to try and cover the same high risk that we've experienced over the last 3 to 5 years. So we have that availability of stock as we go forward. Those that don't meet that criteria, they will still be encouraged that that's the requirement of a smoke detection within the housing, whether that be private, rented or own domestic. But we will still continue to leave them in that situation with the detection that we fit as an interim measure. But again, it will be very clear that it's the duty of the house owner to upgrade through time, hopefully within the time frames laid out by legislation, to that new standard.
Okay, thanks for that, Craig. Jeff, you want to come back in?
I appreciate, it's not your responsibility. I do think it's something which is very concerning in terms of, once again, the elderly and the most vulnerable, because they may think they've got a smoke detector fitted and that's it, they're cleared. I can see causing a lot of problems in terms of insurance claims, etc. in future if it isn't rectified.
Okay.
Sorry, Chair, you're on mute again.
I'm sorry. Were you wanting to respond again, or are you happy to move on?
It was just to offer reassurance, Councillor, that as I said, that's why there is the cascade of stock to put us in that position. We clearly have a focus on the vulnerable, and we will make sure that they have that level of detection fitted. I absolutely acknowledge your point that does not take away the expense that some people may have to find to put out and to allow them to reach that standard. But we will absolutely never leave somebody in a position of risk. We will ensure that there's a level of smoke detection within that premise.
Thanks, Craig.
Okay, thanks, Craig. Ian Blake now, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I was asked to bring this up on behalf of a fellow councillor, in fact, one of Dougie's fellow councillors. It was regarding the fires, the woodland fires in the Mossdale area. Now, obviously, the fire service were put under considerable pressure during that time, and I think everybody acknowledges that. However, there has been some concern raised about the lack of consultation with some of the residents who had properties very close to the fire. And the reason given for that lack of consultation was we can't come because of the COVID situation. I just wonder if our partner agencies, I mean, obviously you refer a lot to the partner agencies, if there's some system that can be put in place where even a note through the door of neighbouring properties, but some communication said, don't worry, you're not under immediate threat, or, and but the fire service will monitor the situation. There is this unfortunately, a bit of confusion by the residents that they were just left out in the limb a bit through that. Thank you.
Okay, Craig.
Thanks, Councillor, and again, I do welcome the opportunity to discuss this in the forum, because as Instant Commander at that particular job, I am aware of the efforts that were put in place to try and provide a degree of reassurance it was very much the early stages of COVID, and there was certain decisions about what our level of engagement would be. I have to confirm that through our corporate comms and media, we used every outlet that we had in social media to raise profile, and I absolutely, in the conversation happened at the time, to acknowledge that that would not necessarily reach the targeted group that we had in mind. We also deployed, or I also deployed, crews to go to those premises that we did feel were in the closer proximity to the risk area, i.e. off the main road and the routes back and forward into our main scene of operations. And that sits as a customer's practice, as you would expect, to make sure there's a degree of reassurance. A number of those people had moved out of their premises at that time, so it was a physical check. I know the Community Council was engaged with directly through our head of comms as well, and they tried to establish that as a rapid reach system to then get round the remainder of the community. But again, we're absolutely happy to take that on as part of the debrief, and we're looking to make sure that we are more robust as we go forward. I think the reference that you made about the COVID times is it was trying to get a proportionate and acceptable response at the time, and maybe in hindsight there's individuals who felt that they were probably close enough because of the scale of the fire that they felt they were in the risk, but from an operational point of view we didn't feel there was any significant risk to the community.
Do you want to come back, Annie?
Yeah, just very briefly. This it was not a criticism of the fire service. I mean, they were very supportive. The residents were very supportive of the actions being taken. It was more of a kind of a learning experience for should this thing happen again. That you know, obviously the fire service themselves were very heavily tackling the fire, the seat of the fire. It's more the relationship with the partner agencies that some message could go out to everybody. Obviously, you made reference about the social media. Yes, a lot of the residents would not be happy with the social media, but it was more for your debrief and looking forward rather than a criticism. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Councillor. Not taken as a criticism, but just a reassurance. It certainly did feature in the debrief, and it's in our plan assumptions for that type of scenario going forward.
Thanks for that. And I guess this was a huge incident at the time, and I've spoken personally to some of the local retained firefighters, and it was a highly challenging environment to be working in. So. And as we mentioned with the debriefing process, it's all about learning from how you would do things differently. But I think the Fire and Rescue Service should be congratulated for the response that they did make to this particular incident. So next up we have Davy Stitt.
Morning, Craig. Page 85 of the report and the retained duty system. I've just seen the figures for Dalbeattie are very low. I take it this will be through staffing shortages, and there's an advertising campaign on to recruit more retained firemen.
Thank you, Councillor. I could give you some background in the Dalbeattie. It was less about the number of vacancies and more about protecting individuals that were off during a period of absence. So actually protecting the roles. So less vacancies that we struggled to fill, but more ensuring that that post is protected for them when they're fit to return to duty. You're absolutely right in the wider context about the ongoing recruitment and the challenges that we have as an organisation, but I would like to compare the page 85 to the data that we've provided in the second report on page 101, which we've added the Scottish availability average, so that as a direct comparator, and hopefully you're reassured that as an area we are well in excess of the availability reached across the rest of Scotland. This gives me a great opportunity, and I know I've mentioned in the past that we've tried to strengthen our retained and volunteer duty system model. That goes across a number of factors. Drumore, as our only volunteer unit, has recently seen the introduction of a rapid response vehicle, which we used as a platform to catalyst for recruitment, and we were very successful in the area with the numbers that they have. Since then, they've gone on to go through a volunteer improvement programme, which now allows them to respond to a greater scope of incident types. So that in itself has been a success story there. their incident demand has now started to increase as a result. Across the region, the introduction of rural full-time posts, which is a watch commander on a Monday to Friday day duty, who have been recruited from the retained pool of staff, has gone from 2, and we will sit with 4 come the start of or mid-January 2021. That in itself will be a huge asset in part of that process to strengthen the retained, and will again start to see the increase in the figures. The system itself, and if you will bear with me, it's very centred in making it appealing employment for the individual, and to achieve that we have to be very flexible and work with employers, and the ability for an employer to state that they need an individual for a unforeseen circumstance, or indeed in their personal life. We have offered our employees the ability to book off at very short notice, and it's that unforeseen event or the inability to plan which has the knock-on effect and makes it very difficult to maintain 100% across the board. But with the resilience and the ability to move staff from station to station, we are in a position where we can drastically reduce that and keep our percentages very high. It's just those hours where the travel time or the notification just makes it non-viable, but can also offer assurances that the cluster process that we work on, there is always cover within our communities. It's just how we deploy it and knowing where it is at the right times. Hopefully that offers a wee bit of reassurance, Councillor.
That's fine, thanks, Craig.
Thanks, Craig. It was very interesting to hear about the retained fire service deployment during COVID in particular. So I don't see any other questions coming forward. So we'll move on to the recommendation. So members were asked to scrutinise the performance report for Scottish Fire and Rescue Service for 1st of April 2019 to 31st of March 2020, and explanatory notes detailed in Appendix 2, and 2, scrutinise performance report for the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service Dumfries and Galloway for the period 1st of April 2020 to 30th September 2020, as detailed in Appendix 3 and explanatory notes. Okay, so moving on to the last substantive item on the agenda. Item 7, Scottish Fire and Rescue Service Dumfries and Galloway consultation on new draft local plan for 2020 reports from the Chief Officer of Restart, Renewal and Recovery. Craig, is there anything that you would like to say by way of introduction before we open it up to questions from members?
Thanks, Chair. Probably the only real difference and point of focus is through time we have had a huge drive on prevention to try and mitigate the impacts on our communities through fire, and I would like to think we've been very successful at that when we see the low figures that we're reporting over the years. But one thing that's always resonated with us in the local fire and rescue service is the impact on our roads, and we have seen more loss of life and more injuries on the roads than we do through fire, and it's a significant part of our business. We still have an active role within the road safety partnerships, and we felt it was appropriate in this particular plan to bring that through as a key priority, and you'll notice that is one of the new priorities within the plan. But I just thought I'd put the context as to why now we feel it's appropriate to bring that forward. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Craig. Now, do any members have questions or observations in relation to the draft plan? Andy Ferguson.
Thanks, Dougie. Good morning, Craig. I hope you're well. I know I raised this with you at the Community Planning Partnership, and I'm wondering, there was a plan to have your first responders first in the scenes to train up to almost advanced paramedic standard, pretty like North American style, and that seemed to hit a bit of a roadblock, shall we say. Have we got any improvement in that situation? Or are we? I mean, let's be honest. You're normally first in the scene, yeah, before the ambulance service is there. So, I would think it's probably vital that we get your guys trained up to even higher standard than they are just now. I'm just wondering if there's any progress in that.
Thank you, Councillor. I suppose it may be a bit of the interpretation that the previous proposal was a large focus on what was classed as OCA Plus, so that was the out-of-hospital cardiac arrest, and that was a real focus how we could improve our contribution towards that safe and well in the communities that we serve. I can offer you absolute reassurance that the training that our staff have right now for first person on scene related to trauma and casualty care and RTCs is very good, and it is just short of obviously applying medical procedures, putting in lines, etc., which clearly is a skill set that sits with our paramedics and our technicians in the Scottish Ambulance Service. The out-of-hospital cardiac arrest is still a live issue, and we are still trying to find ways as an organisation to deliver that. The proposals for a new pay award to have that brought in as a core function was not accepted through our members through negotiation with the trade unions. So we are still working with others who deploy that form of assistance in a different way. And generally I'm alluding to an additional allowance payment, and it's about being able to fund that and make that transition. There's a large scope of work going on with our staff at the minute about the future vision of the service, and that consultation is building how the roadmap of how we'll achieve that.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Next up, Willie Scobie.
Thanks, Dougie. It's just in regards to what Craig was saying about RTCs, and I think you said increase in number of fatalities, deaths, and so forth. And I see that in page 126, Craig. And I just wondered if you've got any statistical details. I know the A77, for instance, is almost the worst road, or one of the worst roads in the whole of Scotland, and the 13th in Europe, and the A75 is no far behind it. You know, is there any way that the figures, if they're on the increase, that we can use this to try and get the improvement, as you refer to, road improvements on page 126? If there's any way that the fire service can feed into the lobbying activities or the council in terms of fatalities on the 75 to get it improved or upgraded to dual carriageway.
Thank you, Councillor. In terms of the statistics that we report, our data is limited to those incidents we attend in relation to RTC, and therefore the special service casualties that we actually would lay our hands on at those incident types. The bigger picture, I suppose, that you're asking for is one that we see more readily and potentially reportable through our road safety partnership, where we see the data for Scottish Ambulance Service and the road policing, which is referred to in Linda's report on page 20, starts to give that overall picture about the number of deaths and the increase or otherwise in people that are seriously injured or slightly injured, and that itself has gone through a change of definition over the last couple of years, which makes it very difficult to have a direct comparison in historical data. But the assurances are there, the role that we do undertake in the Road Safety Partnership, that we are working towards that Vision Zero. You may or may not be aware that the Scottish Government through Road Safety Scotland have had quite a robust consultation process on their new 2020 to 2030 plan, and a large part of that was influenced with conversations they had with the Road Safety Partnership within Dumfries and Galloway, and about how we streamline those lines of communication. So we are actually informing those at a national level of the challenges we have, and the 5 E's, from the education right through to the engineering solutions, are the way that we do need to actually achieve that. So we will continue to build those links, and through the national strategy we start to see that there is a better route to share those issues, and not necessarily direct lobbying that you're referencing to, but certainly raising awareness of the challenges.
Thanks, Craig. Are you happy?
Thanks, Craig.
Willie?
Yeah, I'm happy that Craig's feeding in, and hopefully that'll feed into STRP2 that we're expecting in 2021. And it has a significant impact on how we come at STRP2.
Okay, thanks for that, Willie. Now, I don't see any other questions or comments coming forward, so if members are happy, we'll move to the recommendation. So at recommendation, members are asked to scrutinise Dumfries and Galloway Draft Local Fire and Rescue Plan 2020 in the appendix, and note that the final draft Dumfries and Galloway Local Fire and Rescue Plan 2020 will be presented to full council for agreement in the first quarter of 2021. Okay, if everyone is happy with that, thank you very much, Craig, for coming along today and responding to the questions from members. It's very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
And moving on then to item 8, any other business deemed urgent by the Chair due to the need for a decision, and I haven't been notified of any urgent business. It's been quite a weighty agenda by comparison for previous police and fire subcommittees, so thanks very much, members, for attendance today and for your participation. Thanks very much.
Cheers, Dougie.